Welcome back. So, we've got some sounds now, and our goblin spear is just a little bit better, but I'd like even more effects. I'd like effects for when the spear impacts with something, but I don't want to just add some kind of a notify in the montage for the attack because if the spear just misses, I don't want anything there, but if it does get a hit, I want to see some kind of impact effect and perhaps hear an impact sound. So what we're going to do is let's see what effects we have. We'll go into Effects, Combat, and Blood Impact. Now we have this blood impact. It's a little bit cartoony, but that fits with the style for the rest of the assets in this project. But if you're using your own assets, of course, you can use really any effect that you want. But this is a nice flashy blood effect, and I'd like to play this. But the thing is, different characters might have different impact effects. You might have some kind of fantasy creature that has blue blood or green blood or something. And by the way, if you wanted a green blood splatter, you could come into this blood impact. I would duplicate it first, but then you could go to initialize particle, and here's the color here used by this effect. You could change it to green if you wanted to, like this, and then you'd have a green effect. I'm going to Control Z to undo that, but just showing you that it's pretty easy. And because we could do this, I'd like the blood effect to be retrieved from the target that we hit with our melee ability. So our melee ability is causing damage. What it can do at the same time as it causes damage is it can spawn some kind of blood effect. Now, being a top-down game, I'm not too concerned with 100% accuracy location-wise when we hit something. When we hit something, I'd like to spawn that blood effect just about at the tip of the spear, at the tip socket. So we can get that combat socket location associated with the montage. We have that in our ability as well. So since we need to get the blood effect from the target that we're hitting, that would be a good thing to, first of all, add to our base character class, and then add a function to retrieve it from our combat interface. So we have two things that we're going to want to do here. So we're going to do that on the C++ side. So I'm going to close the editor. And from here in Writer, I'm going to go into the character folder, into Aura character base, and I'm going to add a Niagara system variable that we can set from Blueprint for the impact, specifically for blood. So just at the bottom of our protected section, I'm going to add a new variable. It's going to be a uNiagara system. Writer's going to ask if I want to forward declare it. I do. And this will be blood effect. And it's going to be edit anywhere. And we'll make it Blueprint read only so we can access it from Blueprint as well. Now, I want a function to return this, but I want it on my combat interface. So we don't have to cast to Aura character base or one of its child classes. So we're going to go into interaction, combat interface, and here in the combat interface, we're going to make a Blueprint native event. And I'd like it to be Blueprint callable as well. So down at the bottom, I'm going to make a function that returns a uNiagara system pointer. I'm going to add the forward declaration up there. So Writer just stuck it way up there. That's fine. And I can drag this uAnim montage way up there as well. That's fine if that's up there too. And this will be a pointer, and we'll call this function getBloodEffect. And as I mentioned, I want it to be a Blueprint native event. So we'll go ahead and copy the U function for this Blueprint native event. And we can override the implementation version in Aura character base and just return that effect. So we'll do it inside of this comment section here. We're going to say virtual uNiagara system pointer get blood effect implementation, and we'll go ahead and generate the definition and return our blood effect. Cool. Okay, so now that we have a way to get the blood effect, we're planning on getting that from the victim we're hitting. An attack montage should have some kind of hit sound as well, some impact sound, but it's going to depend, I think, on the montage itself, because we might have one attack animation that swipes with a hand, another attack that swipes with a weapon, so I think this should be closely linked up with that attack animation. Now, if we go back to Aura character base, and we search for attack montages, we have the array of F-tagged montages. And if we just go to the declaration or usages, we see that it's in the combat interface. We could easily associate a sound effect with a given attack montage that we can play or not play depending on whether we got a successful hit. So I'm going to add a U sound base pointer to this. And I'm going to call this impact sound and set it to null by default, null pointer. Give it the same U property as the others in the struct, like so. And now we can set an impact sound per attack. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile and launch. All right, so back in the editor, what I'm going to do is first open BP Aura character. And I'm going to search for combat, and here's my blood effect. I'm going to set that, and I'm going to choose NS blood impact for that. So now Aura has a blood impact. Now, we can just go into the character folder and to BP enemy base and just set this on the base enemy blueprint as well. So I'm going to search for blood and set that to blood impact. And now all enemies will just have that red blood, but you can override that per enemy if you like. So now our Aura character has blood. We can also go into our Goblin Spear blueprint, BP Goblin Spear, into its attack montages. And notice that the single array element in attack montages now has an impact sound. So what would be a good impact sound to play in the event that our Goblin Spear hits something? Well, let's take a look at Content, Assets, Sounds, and hidden within some of these folders, there's a sound I think I'd like to play. If we go into Enemies, Ghoul, and Swipe, I think this would be a pretty decent impact for a spear. So I'm just going to make a sound effect here. And I'd like to go to the sounds folder into the SFX template multi. I'm going to copy that into the swipe folder in Ghoul. So drag over to swipe, copy here, and open that. I can go ahead and just rename it right away to SFX_swipe. And I can open it up. And I'm going to open the content drawer, click Dock and Layout, and I'm going to go into Enemies, Ghoul, Swipe, and get these three. I'm going to select my input array and drag all three in for that and press play. And there it is. Now, it's a bit loud, so I'm going to select my volume multiplier and put this way down, like 0.1. That might be a little too low, so let's go 0.25. And I think that sounds pretty good. And of course, you're going to want to test this. Ideally, you would test with some studio monitors as you're playtesting the game and make sure everything is just right. So I'm going to put this SFX swipe into my BP Goblin Spear and its attack montages array right here for the impact sound. So with SFX swipe selected, and I can set that impact sound. So now that I know this is set, at least for Goblin Spear, I can go about playing this sound effect and spawning the blood particles. And I'm going to do that in my melee attack ability. So I'm going to go to Content, Blueprints, Ability System, Enemy, Abilities, and OpenGA Melee Attack. And go all the way to the end here, where what we're doing is causing damage, but we're doing so in this for loop, in a for each loop, looping over all live players within radius. Now, we're checking to see if it's a friend, and if it's not a friend, we're causing damage. What we're also going to do is spawn those blood effects. Now, remember, we're going to spawn the blood effects at the tip of the spear. So if this goblin happens to damage two auras or two player-controlled characters that happen to be within the radius of that sphere at the tip of the spear, there's really no point in playing two impact sounds and spawning two blood particles, unless, of course, both characters had different blood particles. So I guess in the case of blood particles, we could spawn two blood particles, but no point in playing the impact sound more than once at the same time. That's just not necessary. So what I'd like to do is, if we reach the true case here, I'd like to create a Boolean variable called hitTarget, or rather than hitTarget, I'm going to call it hasHitTarget, as hitTarget sounds like a noun, like something that you would store, like a reference to a hit target, but this is a Boolean whether or not we have hit a target. And if we've caused damage, we're going to set has hit target to true. And by the end of this, before we end our ability, at the end of this for each loop, we're going to check that has hit target Boolean. And if we have, then we're going to play the sound once. So we're going to use has hit target for the condition, and we'll play that sound. But regardless of whether we play the sound or not, we're going to end the ability. So both the true and false will end the ability. But in the true case here, we're going to play one sound, and that's going to be the sound associated with our tagged montage. Now notice we have an impact sound. We're going to drag that down and create a reroute node. And we're going to reroute it all the way over here. So another reroute node, and then we're going to play this sound. So what we're going to do is play sound at location. And what is the location? It's going to be the combat socket location that we got here. So we'll hook that in, just tidying this up a bit. And this will be for the true case. So the true case, we play the sound, but we also end the ability right after. Okay. And then, of course, we can spawn the impact particles. We could do that right here when we cause damage. So we're going to use the blueprint callable function get blood particles, or get blood effect, we called it. And this will be on the target, which is the array element here in the for loop. So we're going to get this node here, add a reroute, reroute it over here. And we're going to get that blood effect, and we're going to spawn system at location. Like so. And the system will be the blood effect, and the location is going to be this combat socket location, which I'm now starting to think that I should store in a variable so we can keep this a little bit neater. So I'm going to just highlight from this point backward and bring things back a bit. And I'm going to promote this to a variable and call this combat socket location. And we're going to set that as soon as we've gotten it and use it here. And then we can just use a getter for it. That's what I prefer to keep these nodes under control. We'll just use a getter for that combat socket location, and we don't need to drag too many wires all over the place. And we're going to use that combat socket location here. We can leave the rotation at 0 and the scale at 1. All the rest of these settings can be at their defaults. That looks good. Now, we did store our tagged montage in a variable as well. So we really don't have to run this big reroute node over here if we don't want to. We could just get that tagged montage out and break it, and we can get that impact sound and hook it in directly here. So just minimizing the number of nodes that we need reroutes for, and that looks better. We could do the same thing right here if we wanted to as well. For now, I think it's okay. Okay. Now the thing is, we're setting these each time we activate the ability, but if we go to class defaults and scroll down, we see that this is instance per actor. So that's okay that we have these member variables, but just realize that they keep their values each time we activate the ability. This ability has been instanced and it sticks around. So in the case of combat socket location, for example, that's fine, we're setting it before we use it. But something like has hit target, this Boolean should be set to false at the very beginning when we activate the ability, because if we ever set it to true, it'll still be true next time we activate it. So we're going to set it to false at the very beginning of the ability. And this on-end ability is getting in my way, so I'm going to delete it. Okay, so now we should see and hear some additional effects. Let's save all and go ahead and let our spear enemy attack us. I'm going to go ahead and just remove the other enemies from the world so we can test just the spear enemy. And there we go. All right. It looks and sounds great. Much better, right? Excellent. And of course, we can increase the number of players to 2. Now let's take a look on the client. And notice that we don't get our impact effects. We don't get the sound, and we don't get that blood either. So why is that? What's going on here? Well, we're playing the sound and spawning those particles from GA melee attack. Now, this is something that we execute on the server. We're executing it from a behavior tree task. And this is for a aura enemy. Aura enemies are not controlled by a player. They're controlled by AI. Now, we know that gameplay abilities are automatically replicated, right? Well, they're actually replicated to the owning client only. And no real players own this enemy AI-controlled character. So if we're spawning a system here in the gameplay ability and we're playing a sound, this is only going to happen on the server. It's not going to replicate to anyone because no one owns this. So for that reason, if we want some cosmetic effects, we need a way to replicate those. And GAS has a built-in way to replicate those types of effects, and that way is via the use of gameplay cues. So we're going to finally learn a little bit about gameplay cues so that we can get these types of effects working in our game. And we'll handle that next.